Hello, good day, and welcome to our video lesson for today on the subject Philippine Politics and Governance. Once again, I am your teacher, Sir Francis Raymond B. Ranalan, Teacher 2 of Pindasan National High School, Senior High School Department. So last time we were able to discuss the first two branches of the Philippine government. We were able to talk about first the executive department, where it carries out or it executes the law, and it is headed by the President of the Philippines. And of course, there is the Vice President and the appointed cabinet secretaries. Also, we were able to discuss the legislative branch of the government, wherein the laws are made by our senators and our congressmen in the House of Representatives. Now, today, we will talk about the judicial branch of the Philippine government. Later on, we will know more about it, and I hope you are excited. All right, so the objectives of the lesson are the following. As our performance standard, you will be able to explain the roles of the judicial branch as a political institution, and as our most essential learning competency, students will be able to analyze the roles and responsibilities of the Philippine Judiciary. All right, so let's begin. The Judiciary. For anything else, do you know who this guy is? Perhaps somebody? All right, so I have a clue here. He is a Filipino attorney and jurist who is currently serving as the 26th Chief Justice of the Philippines. So I just want a name. Okay, anybody here? Do you know the name of this person? He was appointed by President Rodrigo Duterte last October 23, 2019. Anyone? All right. So the name of this person is Diosdado M. Peralta. He is the 26th Chief Justice of the Philippines. And until now, he is still the Chief Justice. So I'm sure you're not very much familiar with Chief Justice Peralta, but we all know that we are already familiar with our President, Rodrigo Duterte, the head of the Executive Department, as well as his Vice President, Leni Robredo. Of course, the leaders of the Legislative Department, or in Congress, we have the President of the Senate of the Philippines, Vicente Tito Soto III. And of course, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, we have the Honorable Lord Alan Velasco. Previously, the position was held by Congressman Alan Peter Cayetano. So there's a quote here which says that the judicial branch is the final safeguard of liberty. It protects the people from someone else's exercise of abusive power, violence, or force. Imagine if there is no judicial branch of government. But before we fully understand this third branch of Philippine government, we have to define first what is judicial power. Accordingly, judicial power is the power to decide on legal disputes. So Article 8, Section 1 of the 1987 Constitution provides that judicial power shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such other lower courts as may be established by law. So the Supreme Court is the result of the provision of the Constitution wherein the judicial power will be vested on it, not in the President, not in the Senate President or the Speaker of the House, but to the Supreme Court, and in such other lower courts as may be established by law. This means if the congressmen and senators create laws which would create lower courts, judicial power will be also exercised in those courts. Also, I think the perfect example of this is the Court of Appeals, wherein this Court of Appeals was not created by the Constitution, but it was created by virtue of a law passed by the congressmen and the senators. Okay? Now, with regards to the lower courts, like the RTC and the MTCs, these were not created by the congressmen and the senators. This was created by the rules of court, created by the justices of the Supreme Court. So technically, The Supreme Court has rule-making powers, creating those lower courts. It would be impossible for the Supreme Court to handle all legal disputes nationwide. All right? So there was this necessity to create the lower courts. All right. So judicial power also includes the duty of the courts of justice to settle actual controversies involving rights which are legally demandable and enforceable. Take note only those rights which can be legally demanded and can be enforced, and also to determine whether or not there has been a grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction on the part of any branch or instrumentality of the government. So the judicial branch has this power to settle these controversies between two individuals, claiming different rights over a certain property or succession or money involved. And also the courts have the power to determine whether there is abuse um, being exercised by any office of government against certain individuals. This is to check also the overwhelming power of the government. Without the judicial power, any abuse might be committed by a government official. And lastly, the central function of the judges is to adjudicate and interpret the law. So, this judicial power also includes the interpretation of whether or not a certain law passed by Congress is constitutional or whether it is legal or not. Now, there is also this concept of judicial independence. The judicial branch is one of the three independent, co equal, and coordinate branches of the government. The independence of the Philippine judiciary is manifested in the following. First, there's the creation of Judicial and Bar Council, the expanded power of judicial review. This means Supreme Court is not the only one that would have this power of judicial review. Later on, we'll know more about that. There's also the fiscal autonomy of judiciary. This means the budget of the Supreme Court and other lower courts cannot be stopped or cannot be hampered or inhibited by any other offices of the government. Power to review proclamation of martial law and the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. So the courts, especially the Supreme Court, has the power to review if ever the president declares nationwide martial or even just a portion of our country be declared in a state of martial law. It will be reviewed by the court if this is constitutional or if this is legal. Yeah, an example of this was when President Arroyo declared a portion of Maguindanao in a state of martial law during the time of the Maguindanao massacre, and of course the recent history on Marawi City, the siege of Marawi City, wherein President Duterte also declared a state of martial law, not just in Marawi City, but in the entire island of Mindanao. And it was reviewed by the Supreme Court as legal and constitutional in order to prevent further expansion of the terrorist groups. And so we have also here this concept of habeas corpus. So if the government or if the president suspends this writ of habeas corpus, the Supreme Court can also review it if it is constitutional or legal. This was specifically abused during the time of President Marcos, wherein he suspended the writ of habeas corpus. So anybody can be arrested or abducted or kidnapped by unknown groups, or there are also some state forces who illegally detained or arrested persons without the validity of a warrant of arrest. So these people would sometimes become desaparecidos, or they just basically disappeared. They're gone even until now, and nobody knows where they are, whether they're still alive or most presumably dead already as victims of the martial law period. So this is very important that the warrant of arrest, or this the writ of habeas corpus, must not be automatically suspended by the president, because this is our right to be presented before the courts whenever the court requires us or summons us to judge us whether or not we are guilty of something. All right. So we also have the security of tenure of the judges. So their appointment is of course secure unless there are very major violations committed. And also, the Supreme Court will sit as a judge in presidential elections. So he filed an election protest against Leni Robredo, but the Supreme Court decided that uh, they junked the protest of Marcos. Leni Robredo is the presumed is really the duly elected vice president of the Philippines during the 2016 presidential elections. All right, so let's go to the structure, organization, and composition of the judiciary. So the present judiciary is comprised of regular courts tasked to administer justice. It's also organized into four. First two being the review courts, and the last two being trial courts. So we have here the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals are review courts. So they review the cases from the regional trial courts and the lower courts like the metropolitan trial courts, municipal trial courts, municipal circuit trial courts, and the municipal trial courts in the cities. So these two, the RTC and the MTCs, are trial courts. This is where the facts of the case are being litigated, and when the results if when the judge already decides a certain case, if a party will want it to be reviewed by the higher courts, they will have to submit a petition for review before the Court of Appeals and finally the Supreme Court. We also have special courts. So what are special courts? These are tribunals that have limited jurisdiction over certain cases or controversies. First, we have the Sharia court. This is the power similar to regular courts, but the subjects over whom judicial powers are exercised are limited to Muslim Filipinos. So our brother Muslims, we have this special court for them, the Sharia court, where Islamic law is being implemented. So we also have the Court of Tax Appeals, where it retains exclusive appellate jurisdiction to review by appeal not only civil tax cases but also those that are criminal in nature. So for businessmen or personalities who have problems with their taxes and they are required to pay hefty amounts of taxes because maybe they delayed in paying their taxes or they avoided paying taxes. So the Court of Tax Appeals is their first court of review in order to at least minimize their tax problems or tax payments. But the rule here is that you have to pay your tax first before you complain. Okay? So we also have the Sandigan Bayan. It is a special court that has jurisdiction over civil cases. This includes graft, corruption, and other offenses committed by public officers and employees, and also in government-owned or controlled corporations or GOCCs. So the Sandigan Bayan is a special court. This only tries government officials, especially I think in a specific salary grade. I think it's salary grade 26 or higher. A person or an employee of the government can be indicted in the Sandigan Bayan. And the one who prosecutes is the ombudsman. The ombudsman is a special prosecutor of the government where it targets allegedly corrupt government officials. So the court here is the Sandigan Bayan. All right, so there's also an expanded judicial system of the Philippines. This means there are also quasi-courts or quasi-judicial agencies. These are bodies or agencies that exercise adjudicatory powers in certain types of controversies. So these include the Civil Service Commission. They have this quasi-judicial power before certain cases are forwarded to the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. We also have the Commission on Elections, where they decide local election protests until such time that it is elevated to either in the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. And also we have the Commission on Audit, where it checks on the expenses or the liquidity of expending the money budgeted to the different offices of the government. So they have quasi judicial powers. It's not limited to these constitutional commissions, no, the CSC, COMELEC, and the COA, but also there is an expanded judicial system to vested to the Department of Labor and Employment through the NLRC, or the National Labor Relations Commission. There's also other offices, no, the Department of Agrarian Reform. They have this quasi-judicial power. This is to declog the courts also of the many cases that they are already um, dealing with. Okay, so this is a simplified overview of the organization of our courts. So if you look at the top, we have the Supreme Court as the one and only Supreme Court of our country. And of course, you have there the Court of Appeals. You have the Court of Tax Appeals, Sandigan Bayan, the Sharia Appellate Court, and of course the quasi-judicial bodies like the COMELEC, COA, and other quasi-judicial agencies or bodies as provided by law. Then, if you look at the Court of Appeals, we have the regional trial courts and the other lower quasi-judicial agencies, and the RTC below it, we have the MTCs. Okay, and the Sharia court, we have the Sharia districts and the Sharia circuit courts. Okay, so depends upon the jurisdiction of the case, a person or petitioner, a plaintiff, or the one who is aggrieved may file either directly to the MTC or, depends on the case, RTC. Now let's go to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is also known as the Court of Last Resort. It is composed of one Chief Justice and 14 Associate Justice. Remember that. Okay? So these are the present justices of the Supreme Court as of this year, 2021. So we have the Chief Justice Diosdado Peralta, and together with him are the 14 Associate Justices. Okay? We have I will mention by seniority. We have Estela Perlas Bernabe. We have also Marvic Leonen. We have Alfredo Benjamin Cagiwa. We have Alexander Gesmundo, Aramon Paul Hernando, Rosmarie Carandang, Amy Lazaro Javier. We have Henry Jean Paul Inting, Rodil Zalameda, Mario Lopez, Edgardo de los Santos, Samuel Gairlan, Ricardo Rosario, and Joseph Lopez. So these are the existing justices of our Supreme Court. So what are the powers of the Supreme Court? First, it exercises regional jurisdiction over cases affecting ambassadors. So what are ambassadors? These are government representatives that represent the interests of the Philippines to other countries or nations. Also, other public ministers and consuls, and over petitions for certiorari, prohibition, mandamus, coaranto, and habeas corpus. This petition for certiorari is technically the petition for review of cases. Also, we have here the prohibition cases, mandamus. These are very specific provisional remedies. So what are the other powers of the Supreme Court? To review, revise, reverse, modify, or affirm on appeal or certiorari final judgments and orders of lower courts. So take note that the orders of the lower courts. So what are the lower courts? We have the CA, the RTC, and the MTCs. The Supreme Court may review, revise, reverse, modify, or affirm the judgments of the lower courts. So what cases? With regards to the constitutionality or validity of any treaty, international agreements, presidential decrees, proclamations, orders, instructions, ordinance, or regulation. These are the powers of the president to declare decrees, proclamation. It can be subject to review by the Supreme Court. And also treaties, or these are agreements between other countries, Philippines and other countries like the US or China, must be reviewed by the Supreme Court. Also, cases involving the legality of any taxes and other toll payments or any penalties relating to tax. All cases with regards to jurisdiction of any lower court is an issue. All cases in which the penalty is reclusion perpetua or higher. So I think this involves criminal cases wherein when we say reclusion perpetua, the minimum here is 20 years to a maximum of 40 years imprisonment. So it is automatically reviewed by the Supreme Court. Or higher. What's higher than 40 years imprisonment? Of course, we have capital punishment or death penalty. But in our country right now, the death penalty was abolished in 2006 during the time of President Arroyo. So if a person is being adjudged or adjudicated into the death penalty, it is automatically converted to reclusion perpetua. And all other cases which only an error or question of law is involved. Take note, in the lower courts, question of facts are very much litigated and deliberated and adjudged, but the Supreme Court, it is purely a question of law. They rarely entertain questions of facts on cases. Factual issues must be resolved in the lower courts. Okay? So the Supreme Court also has a power to assign temporarily judges of lower courts to other stations as public interest may require. So there's also an order of change of venue or place of trial to avoid a miscarriage of justice. So an example of this was the Mamasapano massacre accused, the Ampatuan family. The case was not tried in Maguindanao or in, I think the judge in Cagayan de Oro also inhibited. So what happened was the venue or the place of trial and the judges assigned was in Quezon City. So that's the judge who ordered the final judgment against the Mamasapano accused. So she's a female judge, I think she's very brave. Okay, so she's a judge from Quezon City, if I'm not mistaken. Also, Supreme Court has the powers to promulgate rules concerning the protection and enforcement of constitutional rights, pleading, practice, procedure in all courts, the admission to the practice of law, the integrated bar, and legal assistance to the underprivileged. All right. So the rules of court here regulates who can become lawyers or practitioners of law, who will become members of the integrated bar, and of course the responsibility of the court to also assist those who cannot afford lawyers, the underprivileged, or some indigent clients. Okay, and also the courts must provide or has this power for the speedy disposition of cases. So every case must be swiftly be adjudicated as much as or as soon as possible. Okay, so I think we have now continuous trial, and I hope there will be night trials in the Philippines, just like in the US. They have evening trials or night trials. So there are night or evening judges in the United States. So I don't know if it will happen in the Philippines, but at least we already have continuous trial. Okay, so Supreme Court also has power to appoint all officials in the judiciary under the civil service law. So all employees in the Supreme Court or the lower courts are under the civil service law. All right, so what offices are within the Supreme Court? We have the Judicial and Bar Council. Later on, we'll know more about it. The Office of the Court Administrator. And of course, you have the Philippine Judicial Academy, Philippine Mediation Center. Of course, the Office of the Court Administrator, it's headed by the court administrator. He's a lawyer who, I think technically he's like a municipal or provincial administrator. He takes care of the day-to-day business inside the Supreme Court. The Philippine Judicial Academy is an office where it's where judges throughout the Philippines have these courses to be enrolled for further professional advancement trainings for judges and lawyers provided in the Philippine Judicial Academy. We also have the Philippine Mediation Center, wherein some disputes are not proceeded to trial because litigation is very costly and takes time, very long time, patience. So litigants are encouraged to settle their disputes through conciliation or mediation as provided by the Philippine Mediation Center. So these are dispute arbiters or conciliators or mediators as provided by the Supreme Court. So right now, we're going to discuss the Judicial and Bar Council. It is created by the Supreme Court. Of course, we have the Chief Justice as the ex officio chairman. When we say ex officio, he's permanent, cannot be removed there. He's, as provided by law, he's the chairman of the JBC. And of course, we have the Secretary of Justice and a representative of Congress as ex officio members, so they cannot be replaced there unless the Secretary of Justice may be removed by the appointing President of the Philippines. All right. So, and also the congressman or a senator as representative will also be removed from his office. But other than that, they are permanent members. And the regular members, we have a representative of the integrated bar. He's a lawyer, a professor of law. So again, it is another lawyer. Of course, another regular member is a retired member of the Supreme Court. So either a retired Chief Justice or a retired Associate Justice, and also a representative of the private sector. So this is a lawyer who practices his profession in private. Okay. So what's the Judicial and Bar Council? They are the members of this council is appointed by the president for a term of 4 years with the consent of the Commission of Appointments. So we have here for the member of the integrated bar, he will serve for 4 years, the professor of law 3 years, the retired justice for 2 years, and the representative of the private sector will serve for 1 year. And the council or the Judicial and Bar Council have this principal function of recommending appointees to the judiciary. So this council is the one responsible for appointing judges in the lower courts as well as justices in the Supreme Court, including the Chief Justice. So they just present to the President of the Philippines a list of a short list of qualified applicants that who will become Associate Justice or the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So it's the President who appoints as recommended by the Judicial and Bar Council. All right, so these are the current members of the JBC. We have Chief Justice Diosdado Peralta as the ex officio chairman, and we have here on the left portion Secretary Menardo Guevara as the Secretary of Justice, of course, permanent member. And Richard Gordon, Senator Gordon is a lawyer, and he represents the Senate. And of course, there's also Vicente Velosa, a congressman, who represents the House of Representatives. No picture of him. And of course, we have from the integrated bar, we have Franklin de Monteverde and Noel Tiham, this one, the right side of the Justice Peralta. He's a retired he is a professor of law, but he's also a retired associate justice. And of course, we have here another retired justice of the Supreme Court, Jose Mendoza. The private sector, Toribio Ilao, is also a practicing lawyer. So these are the members of the JBC, and if you look at it, they are all appointed by President Duterte, except Gordon and Veloso, who are elected representatives and senators of the Congress. Okay. Now let's go to the qualification of the members of the Supreme Court. First criteria here is that he should be a natural-born Filipino citizen. So it should be either his parents are Filipinos or he's born here in the Philippines. And he must be at least 40 years old. If you're still 39, you are not qualified, okay? 40 is the minimum age. I think the youngest Associate Justice ever appointed was Justice Leonen. And then he must have 15 years or more a judge of a lower court or engaged in the practice of law in the Philippines. So it's either he's a judge for 15 years in the RTC or the MTC or the Court of Appeals, or for 15 years he's been practicing law in the Philippines. So technically, if you are just teaching law, you are already practicing law. Like, for example, Justice Leonen, he was never a judge of a lower court. He was a professor at the University of the Philippines College of Law. And also, Chief Justice Sereno was not a judge of the RTC or MTC. She was practicing privately and was also teaching as a professor in the University of the Philippines College of Law, but she still became Chief Justice. And of course, we have here proven competence, integrity, and probity. So it must be competent, integrity, honest, probity must be righteous. Okay, so very ideal. So we have also here the appointment of the justices. It's the members of the Supreme Court and judges of the lower courts shall be appointed by the president from a list of at least 3 nominees prepared by the JBC or the Judicial Bar Council whenever there's a vacancy in the position of justice. So there is no confirmation. Once it is appointed by the president, it is already automatic. Okay? So, all right. However, the justices of the Supreme Court may be removed from office through impeachment, just like the president and the vice president. Okay? So, what is impeachment? I think we have an overview of this in the previous discussions on the legislative and the executive, but let's make a review here. What is impeachment? Impeachment in the Philippines is an expressed power of Congress. Take note, impeachment is a power exercised by Congress or the legislative department to charge a serving government official with an impeachable offense. Okay? After being impeached, the official is then tried in the Senate. All right? So, the filing of the impeachment proceedings is in the House of Representatives or the congressmen. Okay? But the trial will not happen in the House of Representatives. It will happen in the Senate, where the senators will act as senator judges. Okay? If convicted, the official is either removed from office or censured. So it's just a majority vote. 24 senators, majority is 12 plus 50% plus 1. So if there's 13 votes against an impeached official, automatically he is removed from office or censured from serving in public office. Okay, so he cannot serve in the government anymore. Impeachment followed by conviction is often the only way to forcibly remove a sitting official. While impeachment is often used to refer to the entire process of removing an official from office, it only formally refers to the indictment stage in the House of Representatives, not the trial stage in the Senate. So technically, impeachment happens only in the House of Representatives. What happens in the Senate is no longer impeachment. It's already the trial stage, okay? Wherein the senators will decide whether or not the person impeached was guilty or not, is guilty or not. Okay, so all right, so it's just a simple majority for a person to be removed from his office. So who are impeachable officials? So in Article 11, Section 2 of the Constitution, these are the impeachable officials. First, we have the President of the Philippines. Then we have the Vice President of the Philippines, Justices of the Supreme Court. This includes the Chief Justice, members of the Constitutional Commissions, the Civil Service, COA, and the COMELEC. Okay? And also, we have the Ombudsman. It can also be impeached. No? Remember, the Ombudsman is a special prosecutor who prosecutes cases against public officers who commit graft and corruption and other impeachable offenses. What are the grounds for impeachment? Okay, so what are the offenses which can become reasons for a person to be impeached? First, culpable violation of the Constitution. So there is this very heavy or blatant violation of the provisions of the Constitution. Second is treason. This means during times of war that public official helped the enemy. Okay? the enemy of the Philippines. In times of war, take note, there is no treason without war. There must be a state of war, and that public official helped the enemy of the Philippines. Third is bribery. It is when a public official, an impeachable official, receives money in exchange for political favors or government favors. Okay, graft and corruption. So graft here is this is when you use money for this money is supposed to be used for this specific project, but you used it for uh, another. Okay, so that is especially if it involves large amounts of money. Okay, corruption is of course when you take home the money, you use it on your own. Okay, other high crimes is very broad and very subjective. That I think Congress is the one who has the power to define what are high crimes. And even this betrayal of public trust, how can we determine if public trust has been betrayed by this official? So there must be specific laws that would determine what constitutes high crimes, what constitutes betrayal of public trust. Okay? So the term of office for the members of the Supreme Court, they should hold office in good behavior, of course. It's a requirement, and until they reach 70 years old. All right? Or until they become incapacitated to fulfill their duties. They may also retire early. Okay? So the disciplined judges of the lower courts, it's the power of the Supreme Court and bank. So the 15 justices must convene together. That's what it means when we say Supreme Court and bank. Okay, the 15 justices together with the Chief Justice decide whether or not to discipline a judge of the lower court. So dismissal of the judge of a lower court must be deliberated by the Supreme Court justices. Okay? All right. So what are the issues and challenges in the judiciary right now? Of course, this issue on graft and corruption, questions on judicial independence, or whether or not these justices or judges are really independent, or maybe they're just acting under orders of a higher power. All right. The manner of the appointments, take note, the Judicial and Bar Council members are appointed by the President. And the list presented by these JBC members, there's a possibility that it might be in favor to the sitting president. Okay, because the sitting president will only appoint a chief justice or an associate justice who is surely most likely in favor with his administration. You will not appoint somebody who is not what do you call this, supportive of your administration. All right, so the JBC can sometimes be a political weapon that can be used by an existing president in determining who will be the sitting justices or the next chief justice of the Supreme Court. Okay, there's also these negative perceptions on delivering justice, delay and inefficiency in the administration of the judicial system. You know, cases 30 years or 50 years ago are still being deliberated, very slow or sluggish. People's accessibility to courts, among others. For example, there are municipalities who have no municipal trial courts. They still go to other municipalities just to file their case. Okay, limited access to justice by the poor to chronic inefficiencies. So the poor, they don't have this much access to the courts because, first of all, courts are far away, expensive, cannot afford a lawyer. So widespread perception of corruption, political interference. Okay, so there are assumptions that politicians intrude in the roles and in the independence of the judges and the justices. Poor have far less access to justice compared to those who have connections, who make use of the system to their advantage. This is very possible, and I don't know if this is very much widespread in our nation right now. Okay, high level corruption is rarely prosecuted. So high-level corruption is rarely prosecuted. Programs are spoiled by killing of judges, filing of libel suits against critical members of the media. Okay, so some lawyers would file cases against journalists that criticize the government, or judges or justices would go against these members of the news and media outlets if they are critical of the existing administration. Okay. Also, last minute Supreme Court appointments done by Arroyo. This is what they call midnight appointments, wherein 3 months or a month before she steps down as president, she appointed Chief Justice Renato Corona as the next Chief Justice. So those are midnight appointments or last minute appointments in the Supreme Court. Of course, the very heavy issues that the judiciary has faced was the impeachment case of Chief Justice Renato Corona and the quo warranto case of Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno. Okay, so Chief Justice Renato Corona's impeachment. So we have here just a brief summary of this impeachment case, because it's the first technically successful impeachment trial in Philippine history. So Corona was accused of ruling with partiality or biased in favor to former President Arroyo, because it was Arroyo who appointed him as Chief Justice, and the next president was Benigno Noynoy Aquino. Take note, Gilbert Teodoro did not win. He was supposed to be the successor of Arroyo, but he lost to Noynoy Aquino. And so, accordingly, Corona was impartial to President Arroyo, former President Arroyo, in cases involving her administration and failing to disclose his statement of assets, or the SALN, as provided by the Constitution or as required by the Constitution. But Corona said that he's not entitled to disclose his $2.4 million deposits because the secrecy of his deposits are guaranteed under the Philippine Foreign Currency Deposits Act, and the peso accounts are commingled funds. It's not his own fund, it's a fund also of his wife. Okay, Corona said that the case against him was politically motivated as part of Aquino III's persecution of political enemies. So what happened? Chief Justice Corona was still impeached and found guilty by the Senate judges. On May 29, 2012, he is found guilty by Senate for failure to disclose his SALN. Okay? The dollar accounts and the peso commingled funds. He was charged guilty. So, 20 out of 23 senators voted to convict him. So I think here in this picture, the only senators who acquitted Corona was Senator Joker Arroyo, Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago, and Senator Bongbong Marcos. The rest, Angara, Cayetano's siblings, Drilon, Cheese Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Honasan, Lacson, Senator Lapid, Legarda, Osmeña, Pangilinan, Coco Pimentel, Ralph Recto, Bong Revilla, Tito Soto, Trillanes, Manuel Villar, and Senator Enrile. They all voted guilty on Corona's impeachment trial. Okay, so this marked the first time that a high-level Philippine official has been impeached and convicted, but Corona said that ugly politics prevailed and his conscience is clear. Take note of this statement. Okay, here the Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno's quo warranto removal. Now this quo warranto here is very unique because supposedly a Chief Justice can only be removed from office by impeachment. So Still, the House of Representatives in 2017 impeached Sereno, and at the same time, the Solicitor General of is the head lawyer of the Philippine government, Jose Calida, filed a quo warranto petition to invalidate the appointment of Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno because of her lack of integrity. Because again, the issue on SALN. Sereno accordingly or allegedly failed to declare her SALN. Okay? She's also responsible for tax misdeclarations and unauthorized expenses. Sereno has questioned the quo warranto because, according to her, she can only be legally removed from her office through impeachment. Okay? So who will decide in this quo warranto? So it was her own colleagues in the Supreme Court, the associate justices, who decide this petition on quo warranto. This is the very first case of quo warranto case, wherein if what happens if a person is guilty of the quo warranto uh, accusation or proceedings, it's as if that his or her position was invalid or void from the beginning. Okay? So deciding on the quo warranto petition, the en banc, the 14 associate justices of Sereno, voted to remove her by a majority vote. Take note of 8-6. Okay? So 8 voted that Sereno is guilty of a failure to properly declare her SALN, tax misdeclarations, and expenses. Only 6 voted against the petition on quo warranto. So those who granted the petition of quo warranto was Justice Tiham, Peralta, the Chief Justice right now, Bersamin, who also became Chief Justice after Sereno, Reyes, Gesmundo, De Castro, who also became Chief Justice after Sereno, and Hardeleza and Martires. Those who voted against the petition was Associate Justice Carpio, Velasco, Del Castillo, Leonen, Bernabe, and Kagiwa. But still, majority prevails because the Philippines is a democratic country. 8-6, Sereno was ousted from office through quo warranto proceedings. Okay? So now, what are the prospects in the judiciary? Political patronage and interference continue to threaten the independence of the judiciary. So I think to really secure the independence of the judiciary, the Judicial Bar Council should be abolished. It's just my opinion. So that the appointment of the Chief Justice and the other justices and the judges should not be compromised by politicians and appointees by politicians. Okay, much less the President of the Philippines. Okay, so creating a strong apolitical judiciary is more crucial in the context of Philippine democratic consolidation. The declining political trust of the public in the judiciary and the justice system is also an important concern. The immediate settling of cases and enhancing the administration of justice remain to be important challenges to judicial performance. The judiciary must also address the growing complexity of legislation and the need for advanced technologies which will enable courts to cope with the challenges of the digital age. So these are just some of the issues that need to be addressed by the judicial branch of our government. Nonetheless, must be realized that the prospects of judicial reform in the country is not solely the task of the said government branch. The judiciary encompasses an expanded justice system, and it involves several stakeholders, including but not limited to other branches and agencies of the government, public and private groups, and the people. All right. So I hope you learned a lot from today's video lesson. So stay tuned to our next video lesson. We'll be discussing on the roles and functions of the local government unit. It's also another very interesting topic. And I hope that you learned a lot today. And always be alert, always be interested when it comes to current events, especially to Philippine politics and governance. So thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye.